Avery, whose show is this? And we're live. Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lounge podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin, Senior Lakers Insider for Clutch Points, joined on this fine Thursday, I'd say afternoon now, by Jovan Buha of Buha's Block. Jovan, literally right before we went live, I took a sip of water and it went down the wrong tube. So if on occasion I duck out of the screen, it's because I somehow forgot how to drink water. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It's been a wild few days around Lakerland, but it always is around this time. But it's been a fun start to the offseason.
Yeah, I think it's been a productive start to the offseason. I was thinking about this morning. This is the first offseason in a little while that the Lakers are actually a better team as a result of. Like, we couldn't say that last year. They sat out that one. I think the one that the one before that, it was, I didn't think it was a very good offseason. And the season kind of played out that way as a result of it. This is the first year, and they've only made, they lost Dorian and they brought in Jake LaRavia, and they obviously brought in Ayton yesterday. But overall, and then you have the Thiero edition too in the draft. Overall, I think basically objectively, we can basically say that this is a better roster right now than it was last season, and especially the last time we saw it.
I agree. I think that you essentially swapped out Dorian Finney-Smith for DeAndre Ayton and Jake LaRavia, which I think is an upgrade overall. You get deeper and you get your starting center. Like I guess you could kind of say it's DFS and Jackson, though. I know there's been some buzz out there that Jackson might be back as the backup center, so we'll see how that ends up playing out. But in terms of like the actual roles on the team, going from Jackson Hayes to DeAndre Ayton as the starting center, and then going from DFS to Jake LaRavia, I think overall is a net positive. Now, they're like big shoes to fill for Jake LaRavia. This is going to be his first time as a full-time rotation player on a team with expectations. I think a lot of his playing time, in Memphis at certain points was because of just the injuries and stuff, and he was in and out of the rotation when they were at full strength. But like now, I thought he had a strong close in Sacramento. I think he's a really skilled player who can do a little bit of everything, and depending on how the Lakers use him, can do some of the things that DFS could do, though is obviously unproven. So I think overall, they're in a better spot than they were 4 days ago. And now, to me, though, I think the work can't be done. I think you clearly need a backup center, and I still think you need probably that D'Anthony Melton type off the bench. But I still contend they need a better starting wing. I think the starting lineup is good. I think the offense of potential with that group is awesome. The defense is still concerning, I would say, to put it kindly. And I think right now they project as a below average defense. And I think that needs to be the thing that they address here in the next few days or maybe the next couple of weeks, whatever. But ahead of Luka's extension, I think they need to trade for a starting level wing.
Yeah, and
defensive wing. Let me be clear.
Like a 2-3 type wing, right?
Yeah.
Like an actual small forward. Rui defends power forwards. LeBron defends power forwards. Luka defends power forwards. And I think they need to break that up a little bit. I want to talk about Ayton because that was I think you kind of have to call it a little bit lucky because the Lakers didn't go into the offseason thinking that he was going to be bought out and be available in the way that they were able to get him. But I thought they executed and pivoted to take advantage of that luck really well. Where I think they, from what I had heard coming into the offseason, the plan was to retain Dorian and to sign a backup center using their taxpayer mid-level, and then probably trade for their starting caliber center at some point in the offseason. I think they found out fairly quickly that the backups that they had in mind were going for more than the taxpayer mid-level, and you eventually saw that with Brooke Lopez. You saw that with Clint Capella. Al Horford, I think, is going to get more than the taxpayer mid-level as well. And I think, one read of the situation here, and especially if you listen to the people kind of closer to the Lakers, it was like, well, we saw that we weren't going to fill that need that way. And then once we saw that we could, we had to pivot, and our kind of outlook with Dorian changed a little bit. I obviously reported some of the details about how that went down, and I have issue with some of the specifics of how that went down. But overall, if you're just talking about executing a game plan, I think they handled it really well, including, by the way, getting Laravia for the amount that they did, because he was very popular with fans in Sacramento and in that organization.
Yeah, I think, and I have reported this on my show, that my understanding of the Lakers' plan going into the offseason was plan A was to keep DFS and then sign most likely a center with that taxpayer MLE, and then look for a potential wing upgrade or another center on the trade market. And that was going to be how they were approaching things. Then once the DFS situation goes south, and it, partly for them not wanting to give the more than 2 years, and then him looking for more than that, and also, I think haggling about some of the financial component with that. Once that was clear that he was not coming back, then they pivoted to plan B, which was to then use that non-taxpayer MLE and use the biannual exception. And all of a sudden you have $19 million combined to play with in free agency that you didn't previously have. Or you kind of had with it was like DFS plus the 5.7 would have been around 20-ish million, potentially 19, 20 million. So you opened up these new avenues to improve the roster. I think they've maximized it. They still have the 5.1 biannual exception, though. I actually have it here. I feel like I haven't seen many people talk about this. Lakers right now are at 14 players on their official roster, including Shake Milton, who has that $3 million non-guarantee. The deadline is July 20th, but with Shake on the roster currently, they're at $192.5 million roughly, which puts them at about $3.4 million under the first apron, which they are now hard capped at due to using the non-taxpayer. So if you waive Shake, that gets you to 13 players, gets you to 189.5. So you have a little bit more wiggle room there to use that biannual. But right now, they cannot even use the full biannual. They could only use 3.4 of the 5.1. And that would lead you right up to the first apron, which you always want some wiggle room with that. The Lakers also like to carry 14 players typically going into the season. So I think that's likely how this is going to play out. So I think they're still in this, even if they don't find the right starting wing defensively, I think they really have to consider a consolidation trade here to open up some flexibility with the back end of the roster. Because again, if it's just DeAndre Ayton, Jake LaRavia, and DeAnthony Melton as your three additions, I think you got better. I don't know how much better you got. And when you look at OKC, I think should be better next season. What Houston did, what Denver did, like I think you need to improve a little bit more than just that. So I still look at them to be active on the trade market, especially for a defensive wing, or at a minimum, some type of consolidation move, which they have not done in the past. So like if they don't do it, I guess that's just like how they operate. But I think that would be a mistake.
Yeah, they don't like consolidating or opening up roster spots for the sake of opening up roster spots. As they found out last year with Gary Trent Jr., right? They didn't want to waive Cam, didn't want to waive Christian Wood, even if it would have given them a chance at Gary Trent Jr. They eventually waived those guys anyway. So that one kind of stung. The not just consolidation, but also very importantly, taking back less in those trades is, I think, or should be a priority. Because like you're saying, the other when you're hard capped, if you go into the season right up against your hard cap, it becomes basically impossible to do almost anything, because it's basically impossible to shed salary over the course of a season if that is your end goal, right? So that is going to be, I think, something that they should really consider. You mentioned Melton there. Been a ton of noise about him, And I would probably go so far as to say, that I would consider the Lakers one of the favorites to land him. Um, Now, what's interesting there is most of the teams who have checked in on him have shown the most interest in him at the minimum. But because there are so many teams interested in him at the minimum, they'll probably have to go a little bit higher. Though I don't know that they'll necessarily have to use all of their biannual on Melton. And that's a scenario here that is worth, I think, considering. The thing with Melton, though, is that he's not a wing. He's a great point of attack defender, really good athlete. Now we'll see where his athleticism is coming off of the ACL tear that he incurred. But what would you think? So if they add Melton, then you have the overlap there with him and Gabe, and obviously you have Austin and Luka, who are going to take the bulk of your point guard ish or off guard, primary off guard minutes. The Laravia acquisition and the potential for Melton, both to me signaled that something else would be coming. Do you think that's a proper read of that situation?
Yeah. And I would also note that I just looked this up. The Anthony Melton has a 6'11" wingspan, despite being 6'3". So I actually think, I don't think you want to use him on threes. I think maybe there are some smaller threes that you could get away with it. But I do think he could guard either backcourt spot. I view a healthy-ish DeAnthony Melton as an upgrade over Gabe. I think he's a better defender when at full strength. Like he just got the non-taxpayer MLE last season. So I think, like, based on more recent play, he has been a better player than Gabe, and I think he would be an upgrade, despite obviously Gabe making $11 million and him potentially being on a minimum or part of the biannual. So I do view, I know there's some overlap there, but I think if you can get a better version of a player on your team, then I think you do that, and then you figure out, do we ship out Gabe in a different deal or whatever. But I would rather go for the better player, even if there is some overlap, if that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, my understanding, again, talking to people post Ayton, and I reported this on my show, like, that they are exploring the wing market. The issue is it's pretty dire. It's grim.
Nobody wants to trade their wings.
It's like, yeah, I mean, I've come up with lists of both, talking to people, but also just looking at depth charts and cap sheets and like what would make sense. And I mean, two of my top three guys were Drew Holiday and Michael Porter Jr. They both got traded. Andrew Wiggins was the other guy in that top three. But then you get to like Keegan Murray, Benedict Mathurin. Mathurin seems to not be available anymore. I don't think Herb Jones is realistic unless you're putting Austin on the table. So you just get to a point where it's like, now we're talking Royce O'Neal, Matisse Thybulle, KCP, that range of player. And I don't think that, like, those guys could help depending on the deal, depending on who they're replacing in the rotation. But I don't think that's like moving the needle enough to where you need it. So it's just a very slim group of players who I think could actually give the Lakers short list of players that could give the Lakers what they're looking for at that starting wing spot. And then when you factor in, like, they do like to have a first round pick and some flexibility going into the season, and you start to just run out of assets that they're maybe willing to actually put on the table in a serious way. And that's where I do have some healthy skepticism, because we've been in this position before where, like, on paper, it's been obvious that the Lakers have a need and they should address that need, and they have the assets to address that need, and then they don't do it. So while I can hear some things and think that that's like the goal, they've had lots of goals over the last few years that they have not always accomplished, in part because they are sometimes reluctant to give up some of their assets.
Yeah, this is one of those spots where, like, right now, I got aggregated this morning for saying that Cam Whitmore is a name to keep an eye on, right? And I said that if Houston decided to get, to cut a little costs here and there, given all of the spending they have done this offseason, and if they decide to expand that KD trade, then Whitmore could be a name that the Lakers, he could be a candidate to be moved. There's a lot of disclaimers in there. I'm not saying that, Cam Whitmore is definitely going to be a Laker, but it's something that the Lakers could do. And I think when you talk about goals, right, addressing that wing spot and specifically wings with foot speed, that's something that the Lakers went into the offseason with keeping very at the forefront of their minds. That doesn't mean that they're definitely going to do that, because as we saw a few years ago, their goal was to trade Russell Westbrook in one of those off seasons, and that didn't happen. Their goal was to do that again the I think following one, and it was like that didn't happen. So, yeah, it's one of those spots where it's like there are a bunch of things that the Lakers could do, and there are a zillion conversations that they have. We'll just see how many of them become productive. Let's circle back to the Miami Heat though, because they do have one of those few wings who are, I think, available. Now, Miami has been adamant they want a first rounder, from what I have heard, and that is basically where the Lakers have pushed away from the table. That they consider, because to this point, the talks that I have heard to this point have centered around Rui, expirings, maybe Dalton, and that's the extent of what the Lakers are willing to put on the table. The Heat are adamant about wanting that first rounder. Lakers don't think that they should give up the younger, bigger player on an expiring contract. They don't feel they should have to also give the first rounder for the older player on the bigger contract with a player option on the other half of this season, on the other side of the season. But what I've been trying to hammer down is whether their math on some of this stuff has changed based on the Ayton acquisition, because I think before they got him without having to give up anything, I think the Lakers were kind of accepting their fate, to, like, for lack of a better phrase, that, yeah, I mean, we'll try to compete, but let's try to keep our powder dry for 2027 for some reason. But still, let's try to just maintain as much flexibility as possible. Now, I have sensed a lot more optimism about, we might, with the right couple of moves here, we might actually be able to do something. Another contention point was the Lakers wanted to include Maxey in the deal, and Miami wanted Gabe back. I think that's something that the Lakers would pick up those talks on again. I think it's possible for the Lakers and Heat to figure out some kind of a compromise here, but that doesn't mean it's probable or likely or anything like that. I just think it's possible, especially now that the Ayton thing is in their back pocket. What have you sensed as far as, like, have you sensed any kind of shift in tone since they got Ayton the way that they did?
I have sensed a shift in, again, like them acknowledging that the starting defensive wing spot is the primary need for this roster. And I think before the Ayton move and before they did anything in free agency, there was a lack of clarity of, you could argue that if they were just going to sign DF, like with the plan A, if we take a step back, go back to the plan A, if they're signing DFS, and even if they land a Brook Lopez or a Clint Capella or an Al Horford with that taxpayer MLE, those guys are, like, I would say Clint Capella, good backup center. Al Horford, good backup center. I think Lopez is a fringe starter between backup. I think he's a little bit higher than that. Like, he's played 3 straight seasons, 30 plus minutes a night. I think there's like a health and availability component and just like an innings eating component to Lopez where he's more of a fringe starter for me. But either way, like, ideally those are all 3 really good backup centers. But you still need the starting center and you still need the starting defensive wing. So I think in some ways, it playing out this way and getting Ayton as a legit quality starting center who, for whatever flaws and limitations he has, for $8 million, $8.25 million, like, that's a really good value.
Out. Like,
that's a really not saying anything out. So you still have that, but so you get the starting center, but you still need the wing. So I think that's where the focus has shifted. The issue again is that there aren't many wings available and the asking prices are high. Now, I can't speak to how substantive the talks between the Lakers and the Heat have been in terms of the back and forth. I was just told by someone close to the situation that when discussing theoretical potential deals between the two sides, that that was the asking price floated out from Miami of, because I got aggregated off of my show last night, and it was funny because it was like over an hour into my show. I don't know how they find these things, but I got aggregated that I had heard the asking price that the Miami was asking for was
the same one,
Rui, a first, and Dalton. And of course, anytime you're saying like, what do you want for, you're on the phone, who do you want or what do you want for this? You're going to ask for the moon. And of course, like they're not going to get that for Andrew Wiggins. I would be stunned if the Lakers gave that up for Andrew Wiggins. I don't think he's worth that price. So I think it would be more so something along the lines of, Rui plus one of the two expirings, and then you figure out that additional asset. And at most, maybe it's Dalton, but I think the Lakers would fight to keep Dalton out of that. I don't think Wiggins is worth a first plus. Like I just think that's a lot to give up, especially with like having one bullet in the chamber. Now, if it's Herb Jones, I think that's a different situation, and I would put Dalton in the first on the table in that case for Herb Jones, but I don't think that's going to be enough for him. So I think point is like they are looking for wings. I just think that they're in this tough spot with their assets where they either kind of have to overpay or underpay. They don't have a lot of like, I think there's some guys that maybe they could get for like 2 second-round picks, even 3 second-round picks, but they don't have multiple second-round picks to trade. So they're kind of in this weird spot where it's like they almost have to overpay with a first or some combination of a first and Dalton, or it's like they're doing, well, hey, will you take on Gabe in a second? And it's like that's not really moving the needle for most people.
Yeah, the Rui thing is interesting because he is definitely overqualified to come off of the bench for the Lakers.
I think he's a starter.
He's not even underqualified to start, right? He's a starting caliber wing. He just happens to defend the wrong wings. And that's where I think I've seen some of the conversation about him, some of the hashtag discourse about Rui, and it's like I just think people are kind of taking a step too far where it's like, no, he's trash. We've wanted to trade this guy for. No, he's not trash. He's a good player. He was one of the few players who I thought actually played with some force against Minnesota, especially later in that series. And it would be a bit of a bummer to move him. I do, however, think that Wiggins would be, both in terms of overall caliber of player and especially in terms of fit, an upgrade over Rui. And I think that's also fair to admit too. I want to talk about Ayton. This has been interesting. The sense that I have gotten is that most Lakers people think he is a starter, like he's starting caliber. There's a little bit of back and forth about that internally. I think ideally they acquire, has to be via trade now because the center market is pretty dried up. But I think their goal is to acquire another player at about the like similar caliber to Ayton and have basically like a two-headed monster at center next season. I know there's a lot of like Jackson Hayes noise out there from like coming into the season. When I asked about Hayes, it was like, yeah, if we get kind of desperate, sure, maybe we'll consider it, but it doesn't seem likely. They aren't desperate anymore. They got Ayton. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of what level of center they bring in behind Ayton here, because he's like right on that fringe just because of the low points. Like the floor of his game is so low. I think you almost have to bring in another center on those nights that he is not playing up to his capabilities. That you don't lose the game because Ayton just doesn't have it that night. What caliber of center do you think the Lakers should pursue there, behind or next to Ayton?
I think you try to get the best center you possibly can. And I think that's an interesting potential pivot for them in terms of if they can't find that starting level defensive wing, can you pivot and then just get a better, comparable level center to back him up. I've been trying to kind of figure out like what, like, it doesn't sound like there was a promise of starting to my knowledge. But
I don't think they did.
I also like always notice how things are framed. And I think the way that the news was broken and the way that he was talked about, it did not seem like a guy who was potentially going to be coming off the bench. So I think based on the conversations I've had, it sounds like he's going to be the starting center. He's going to likely play 30 plus minutes a night. And this is, I think, looked at as a golden opportunity for him to set himself
Absolutely
up for his next contract, right? And play for the Lakers, play with Luka, play with LeBron, play with Austin, be on a team that should win 50 plus games, be a potential home court advantage team, maybe go on a deep playoff run. So like, I think this is all setting up nicely for him to like just go back to 2021 and 2022 and the way that we were talking about DeAndre Ayton then. And there's obviously been something of a fall from grace from that point. But like, I think that player's still in there. It's just a matter of can he tap into that? Can he tap into that consistently in LA? So for me, I mean, it's tough because like if you could get Nick Claxton or Daniel Gafford or one of these other center targets that like I think those two guys would actually be for me more ahead of him just in terms of their fit with Luka and just their athleticism and whatnot. But I mean, then you know, I guess that's just something you have to navigate if you go down that road. I don't know if the Lakers would want to give up a first though, because they kind of, to your point earlier, like they had this situation, this fortuitous situation with him getting the buyout, occur. And I don't know if at that point, like maybe you just keep your powder dry for later in the season, and maybe there is a situation where the Wiggins price drops or Herb Jones, like they're just going in a different direction in New Orleans, or there's another wing that shakes loose, and now all of a sudden you have Dalton and the first and some expiring contracts to move that price. Like I'm a fan of building. I've said it a million times. I'm a fan of building the team in the off season compared to in season. But if the trades aren't there for wings, which right now it's pretty dicey, like I think that might be your best move versus if it's, you know, the Nick Claxton price of potentially Dalton and a first, or at least one of those two. Now all of a sudden, I don't know if you can get that wing later in the season, right? So now I think you're kind of capping your ceiling. So I think I'm okay with them pivoting to trading for a center, but I think they got to be careful because I still think the wing need is the one to me that ultimately will determine their ceiling.
Yep. You and I were texting last night about where they sit in the conference right now. Let's assume LeBron is on the team, which I think is a much safer assumption. Mm-hmm. Let's assume LeBron is on the team. Let's say that this is all they do from here on out. We won't say the Melton thing or like let's say they don't use their biannual. This is their team with their 14 players on the roster. Where do you have them?
So I'm going to tier it and that'll be how I break this down. So right now,
because that's kind of how I was going to do it too.
I have tier 1, OKC on tier their own. They did get punched in the mouth by Denver, and maybe that now that Denver's better, like that could be an interesting playoff series if those two teams match up. But for now, they won 68 games. They won the championship. They have their own big three that are all ascending. I would expect all three players to be better next season. They've been through the playoff crucible. Like that's a scary team. And they also have a million picks to upgrade the roster if at some point they suffer an injury or they just feel like they're not quite sharp or good enough in like the defending title year. Like that team is set up very nicely.
Yeah.
Tier 2 for me right now is Houston and Denver. I think those to me are clearly now the second and third best teams in the West. And I think they're on their own tier. Houston, you add Kevin Durant, you extend Steven Adams and Jabari Smith, you renegotiate with Fred VanVleet, then you also add DFS. And Capella, like I just think they're loaded, they're deep, they're long, they're really good defensively, they're young. Like they should be able to get by even with a couple injuries, as long as it's not like Şengün or Durant or Thompson. So they're set up, I think, really well for the regular season. I have some playoff questions with them. Then Denver, we've seen they've been a 50-ish win team for the last few years, obviously 2023 champs. And I think they got much better with Cam Johnson, Bruce Brown, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Jonas Valanciunas. They finally have a bench for the first time since maybe even before the title team. Like they barely had a bench the title year.
I wonder if this is going to hurt Jokic's MVP case.
Maybe,
like,
maybe
it's like his on-off numbers aren't going to be so terrible now.
Yeah, I mean, I think Valanciunas. I'm not the biggest Valanciunas guy, but like compared to DeAndre Jordan, it's an upgrade. And then you get to tier 3, which for me, in some order, is Minnesota, the Lakers, the Clippers, and the Warriors. I think with the Clippers and Warriors, they have real questions with the age of some of their best players, like Kawhi's 34, James Harden's 35 with Golden State, Steph's 37, Jimmy's going to be 36, Draymond's 35. So I know the Lakers, of course, have their own question with LeBron, but like I think LeBron, we know like LeBron was still a top 10 player last year, second team All-NBA, 6th in MVP. I think Steph is going to be fine out of all these guys, but like there are some questions with health and availability. So I would put the Lakers ahead of those two. Then Minnesota, to me, it just comes down to, do the Lakers make a couple of tweaks at least to the bench? I think as constructed, I would put Minnesota ahead of the Lakers. But if the Lakers add a Melton and maybe an Amir Coffey or something like that to at least like improve the bench depth, then I would put them ahead of Minnesota. And then if they trade for a starting wing, then I think they elevate into that tier 2 with Denver and Houston. And maybe if it's like a Herb Jones or something, then even they're knocking on like the top of that tier. But for me, I can't quite put them on that Denver-Houston level unless they make a trade.
Yeah, I actually lumped Denver, Houston, and OKC together in that top tier. Yeah. OKC I think is going to be a juggernaut again in the regular season. It wouldn't surprise me if they ran away with the conference again. Denver I think got quite a bit better and more importantly steadier. Like I just think MPJ was so unpredictable and he tended to kind of fade in the playoffs. I think Johnson's going to be a big upgrade there. Getting Bruce Brown back, I think, is a pretty big deal. He was like not just in terms of basketball,
on a minimum,
but also in terms. It's so annoying. But like getting him back also beyond basketball, I think he was a big chunk of their identity and their kind of toughness and like he brings a little oomph to what they do out there too. So I think that is a big deal. Obviously, Houston just a masterful offseason so far. And I think they're going to be super tough to deal with. So I would put the Lakers kind of in a tier of their own after Houston, though. And this might be a homer take. This might be too rosy an outlook. You guys know I'm known for rosy outlooks when it comes to the Lakers, but it might be maybe a little too optimistic on the Ayton thing. I just really think Ayton has been such a product of his situations. Like he did all the right things in Phoenix to get his extension, and then Robert Sarver screwed him up, like screwed him over. You know, Sarver told him what to do, and then he did it, and then he was like, psych. And I think that kind of made Ayton pretty cynical towards the organization from that point forward. And then he goes to the Trailblazers after they trade Dame, while they're trying to tank. I don't know how like you make that situation okay. I actually think he'll be pretty good with the Lakers. And if he is, you know, like even I think if he's like a above average center, that's so much better than the Lakers had last year. That's such a huge upgrade at a key position, especially for a Luka team. So I actually think they belong a little above the Clippers, Minnesota, even Minnesota, given that Minnesota beat the crap out of the Lakers in the playoffs this last season. I still would put the Lakers above them. I think. So
you think currently, if the two teams lined up tomorrow, you would pick the Lakers to win that series?
I think so. It'd be tough.
Okay. I
think it would go 7. It'd be, you know, kind of a 51-49 coin flip kind of a situation. I think the Nickeil Alexander Walker.
I don't know if losing Non, adding Ayton shifts it from like the 5-game series to LA winning.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's that big of a shift, but I think it depends on what they like. I think basically my point is I just think there's more to do with the roster, because if we just look at it as is right now, I think flipping DFS into Ayton and LaRavia is a win, and it's a really good start to the offseason. But I still look at it like clearly the defense was not good enough. And I think they now have a couple of pieces within the rotation to help the defense be better overall. But I don't know if that vaults them from where they were to like top 10. Like I don't think they're as currently constructed capable of being a top 10 defense. And then I also think the depth, again, like you are adding another rotation player in, which is important, but they were barely to like 6 guys.
Yeah.
And now maybe they're at 6 guys. And
he was
it's like,
one of the
I still
5
think
guys
they
he
need,
trusted. Yeah.
I still think you need more depth in my opinion.
Maybe I'm just putting my ear to the crowd, given the state of my mentions for the last like few days. And I'm just like anything but no, I think it's absolutely fair to point out LaRavia and Ayton going in, Dorian coming out, can't be, even with Nickeil Alexander-Walker leaving, that can't be enough to swing that series. I think that's fair. And I could maybe be talked down to, at the very least, I would say they in Minnesota are in their own tier. I'm not putting the Clippers in. I don't think I'm putting in the Clippers in with them. We just will never be able to trust Kawhi's health or James Harden in the playoffs. And then who was the other?
Warriors is there's just wild card with Kuminga and just the age of their
the Kuminga thing
3
sucks.
best players is You're
But
right. And I think the other thing that I'm actually going to shout out the chat right now because I've been monitoring it as we go. Like the other factor here is Luka. And if Luka is, I mean, we've seen the way he looks in photos and videos throughout the summer. And it's like that dude, when he is in his tip-top shape, is an MVP level player, like best player in the world caliber guy, top 3 caliber guy. And like if the Lakers are getting that version of him next season, which all indications as of right now are they're getting that guy, like they could easily blow past expectations just because of how great Luka is. So even if there are whatever flaws or limitations are with the roster, like he is that great that he could paper over a lot of them. So like my questions with them are honestly more in the playoffs. I think they're going to be a really good regular season team and they could be the 3 or 4 seed even as constructed. I just think when we get to the brass tacks of someone's got to defend these perimeter guys, and I just don't love the current options that they have.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think Melton is kind of a necessity to kind of balance out that aspect of it. Jovan, it is the busiest time for you and for those of us who are covering this thing. So I greatly appreciate you making the time. Obviously, to everybody who is listening here and has enjoyed this, make sure you guys are subscribed to Buha's Block, whether it's on YouTube or in pod form. Congratulations again on the move to fully independent content. And I hope it's you've enjoyed it so far. And I'll see you in Vegas. I'll see you in a week or so.
I'll see you in a week, man.
All right. Thank you very much.
The Brawny flag, the Brawny versus flag.
Next time Thursday you come on, I need the story of like all of the beat reporters being there when the Ayton news dropped because
it was. I need that
picture painted. Have a good one, man. All right. So I am going to what I'm going to do now is we have 9 starred comments. So I'm going to dive into those. If you have any further starred comments, hit them with me. And then I will also, Richard, we're not going anywhere, buddy. We're staying. I'm staying right here. I have a lot of starred comments that I need to acknowledge. So I will dive into those. What I am going to do to kind of segue the 2 halves of the show, I am really proud of the way that the Great Western Forum kind of came together. And I am really happy with how that first episode went. So I'm going to play the intro to the Great Western Forum pod. That is available on this feed. It's available on Jovan's feed. And it is going to continue to grow, I would imagine, in terms of the guests that we bring on it and stuff. So check out this. And then on the other side of it, I'll go ahead and dive into some of your guys' super comments.
It is a beautiful 75-degree day in Southern California. The crowd filing into the Forum in Inglewood.
Inside the Forum at the corner of Manchester and Prairie.
Whether you're kicked back in the lounge or grinding in the film room, the block is always hot for the Lakers.
The Los Angeles Lakers are the world champions of basketball.
It's the Great Western Forum.
Oh, chased out by James. Blocked by LeBron.
The Magic, he pivots, a 360 turn. He's around one, he's around two. Magic to Green underneath.
Now the ball to Shaq, screen.
A windmill. They're going crazy at the Fabulous Forum.
Hosted by Anthony Irwin, Pete Zayas, and Jovan Buha.
It's showtime.
So yeah, that is the intro to our shows there. Really happy with how that came together as well. But let's go ahead and dive in. Let's dive into your guys' questions and comments, starting with the most important clip played on this show. All right. The first of the starred comments that I saw was from Vinny Jaj, who writes, and thank you, as always, to all of you who left these super chats. But can the Lakers get Wiggins without the first? Also, here the Lakers want to keep Dalton. Also, thoughts if we can get Herb somehow. Any way we can keep Rui for the 6-man role. Sorry for so many questions. You know what, man? For super chats, you could throw as many questions on here as you like. I'll start with the Wiggins without the first thing. I said this, I should have honestly grabbed the clip. But at the onset of my reporting about the Wiggins situation, I said on the show that the reason Miami has been kind of, stuck in mediocrity for as long as they have been is not everybody is rowing in the same direction there. And you have one half of the organization pushing really, really hard to compete now. And every time a star becomes available, they make a run at the star. But the reason that their offers are never very realistic is because the other half of the organization, Nicky Harrison's kind of, I think it's Nick Harrison, the owner's kid is technically, as Dan Lebatard talked about on his show today, Pat Riley's boss. And that half of the organization is a lot more interested in building towards the future and kind of recovering from being so competitive for as long as they have been, and just trying to make themselves more flexible so that they can make more realistic offers if a superstar becomes available. And what tends to happen is, they wind up not doing stuff, and their asking price is just not realistic. And so for Andrew Wiggins, for the price to be set, as I said to you guys back then, at Rui and Dalton and the first and expiring contracts, they don't want to take Vando back, right? If it's going to sit there, then they're never going to get anything done. They aren't ever going to get that kind of an offer for Andrew Wiggins with a player option for next season at $30 million. It's just not going to happen. So, can the Lakers get Wiggins without the first? They should be able to, because they're sending over Rui, who is the younger player, who is a comparable player. Remember, the Lakers aren't trading Rui for Wiggins because Wiggins is so much better. They're trading Rui for Wiggins because Wiggins fits better. He fits the lineup better. Their lineup makes a lot more sense if it's Luka, Austin, Wiggins, LeBron, Ayton. That's a much more sensible, especially defensive group. Still not great defensively, but it makes more sense. And it's not a matter of, the Lakers are sick of Rui. They clearly aren't. They love that dude. So can the Lakers get Wiggins without the first? I don't know. I would probably lean no, but they should be able to, given the type of stuff that they have put on the table. Like I honestly, and I know I'm biased here, this being a Lakers pod, me being, a lifelong Laker fan, I am going to acknowledge my biases here, but I also don't think I'm being ridiculous when I say Pat Riley is like Celtics era Shaq. he's, especially if his legs are cut out from underneath him by the owner's son being his boss. So yeah, should they be able to? Absolutely. Can they? I don't know. Uh, Also, here the Lakers want to keep Dalton. Yeah, I don't think they want to trade him. I don't think it's a matter of the problem is they just don't have very much stuff, and Dalton is one of the few assets they have that has positive value. So, do they want to keep Dalton? Yeah, I think they would like to see what he looks like, with a full year under his belt, a full off season, see if he's able to look a little bit better and look more consistent next season. But if the choice is, well, let's see what Dalton looks like versus let's go out and get the big that we needed before or the wing that we definitely still need, I think they would rather do the latter. Also, thoughts if we can get Herb somehow. Herb Jones is an interesting one in that he shouldn't be available. Like that, if I had a Herb Jones in my organization, I would need to be like you would need to pry him from my cold dead hands. And yet Joe Dumars and the rest of that Pelicans front office, they took such a step back in terms of competence going from David Griffin to this group that he could be gotten. A lot of people believe it'll probably cost a lot. And, the Lakers, if they want to get more serious about her, would have to entertain Austin being in that deal. I don't think they would do that, but they would have to at least entertain it to pass the conversation along. But yeah, can they get her? Maybe. I would say maybe slightly yes. Also, any way we can keep Rui for the 6-man role depends on what you're trying to do. If the Lakers want to trade for another center that is about DeAndre Ayton's caliber, it shouldn't cost Rui. You should be able to get him that center for Dalton and maybe a pick swap down the road and some expiring money. That should be the case. Now we'll see if that is actually the case. And then oh, that was the last question. Sorry. Oh, no, you did have another one. So, Vinny Josh, also our odds of getting Horford. Those I don't put particularly high. The Warriors, I would probably say are the clubhouse leader for Horford, based on the stuff that I've heard. They can also pay him more, and he would have probably a bigger role with the Warriors. So if the Lakers do get him, it would be some impressive business from Rob to be able to make that happen. They would also, remember, as Jovan said, they would also have to cut salary elsewhere in order to open up the full biannual. So that is also worth noting. And if they do that, so if that happens, like if Shake just randomly gets waived, your ears should pierce up, like perk up. If Shake, if we're just sitting around one day and we get the notification, yeah, Shake is gone. That's when you should, start paying close attention. The Lakers are about to do something. Hopefully. Gorilla asks, did Pelinka do enough to stay off the hot seat? Oh, I don't think he was ever on a hot seat. He just acquired Luka Doncic. He just got an extension. Now, I do think he's still going to be closely observed by, the new ownership when they take over. And I don't think Rob will ever do enough to not be closely observed by that group. But no, like in terms of any kind of pressure this year, and in that, this notion that maybe he would be gone after this year, I don't quite see that. I would probably give him a runway of at least a couple of years. And then once Guggenheim fully takes over, then that conversation probably becomes a lot more a tangible possibility. David Furman asks, if we do get Horford or Melton, I'd trade Maxey or Gabe Vincent. Oh, Maxey and Gabe Vincent for KCP. Word is, at least initially, that and by the way, while we have been recording, Shams Charania reported that the Houston Rockets are waiving center Jock Landale. I'm going to touch on this really quick. I'll come back to your question here, Furman. The Rockets waiving Landale is interesting. He has a July 7th guarantee, so they didn't have to do this now. They had plenty of, they had a few days to be able to make this decision. Jesus, it like blew my mind just now that we are actually in July. But the Landale thing is interesting because that's somebody that the Lakers were kind of kicking the tires on in the trade market. They, I reported, as I talked about earlier on the show, I should find, here we go. Here's the aggregation. So I wrote verbatim, another name league sources have linked to the Lakers, Cam Whitmore. If Houston decides to shed a little salary, or if they expand the Kevin Durant trade to include their acquisition of Dorian Finney-Smith, Whitmore, who was looking for a larger role than he'd have on that loaded Rockets roster, is considered a candidate to be moved. Nowhere in there. Nowhere in there do I say Cam Whitmore's coming, everybody. Woo! Like, no, I am saying that if this, and this happen, that maybe this guy could be a candidate to be moved. Here, I'm going to pull up my whole article just for a second. I'll go ahead and put it in the chat. So you guys, if you guys are interested in reading it, you can. At the very bottom of my article, I wrote the following. Does this mean the Lakers are definitely going to trade for all of these players? Obviously not. The point is to show what the Lakers are aiming to do and the types of players they're positioning themselves for. Point being, Pelinka is very active after pulling off the Ayton acquisition and has more leverage in discussions as a result of the signing now that teams can't just assume they're desperate for anybody at the position. I've tried to say this on the show. Twitter doesn't really allow for this kind of nuance, but there are kind of a few ways to report on the goings on in the NBA. The way that I like to report on the Lakers, not everybody likes to do this, but the way that I like to report on the Lakers is to let you guys know by way of options what the Lakers are considering doing and what their goals are. I try to paint a picture of what their goals are and allow us to, over the course of transaction windows, identify the goals as they're checked off, right? And this doesn't mean that they are definitely going to accomplish all of their goals. Most teams don't accomplish all of their goals in a transaction window. There's almost always some leftover work that you have to address either later in the season or whenever the next transaction window comes. And like right now, I have a whole bunch of people yelling at me, you said Cam Whitmore, you said Cam Whitmore, you said Cam Whitmore. And I'm like, no, because I saw Dan Wojcicki reported that it's unlikely that Dorian Finney-Smith and that transaction is going to be looped in with that big 7-team trade that they're working on. And to that point, it's like what I heard last night when I wrote that article was that there was some hope that maybe Houston would consider doing it, but the Lakers also understood that is Houston's prerogative. The Lakers don't have any control over whether or not Houston decides to do that. They already got Dorian. So if Houston decided, no, we don't want to include that as part of this trade, we just want to sign him outright, the Lakers, they can't make them do anything. So anyway, that's my long way of addressing the Cam Whitmore stuff. I know that it's going to come up in comments probably later, but yeah, that's somebody that the Lakers liked coming out of the draft. They wound up drafting Jalen Hood-Schifino because there were enough people in the Lakers organization who were scared enough of Whitmore's medicals that they wound up passing. But given the way that Whitmore's career has gone to this point, those people in the organization, and especially in comparison to how Jalen Hood-Schifino's career has gone to this point, those people in the organization have been able to say, like, not "I told you so," but we should give this guy a look if he's actually available. Now, to what extent he's actually available, we'll kind of see. All right, sorry, David Furman. I will go back to your question here. So if we get Horford / Melton, I'd trade Maxey and Gabe Vincent for KCP. So KCP, according to the reports, I haven't done any digging on this. According to reports, after they acquired him, people in Memphis were reporting that KCP was a part of Memphis's plans for this season. They aren't tanking. They just gave Jaren Jackson Jr. that extension, so he can't be traded for a long time. There is no indication that they are looking to trade John Morant. So I'm also really kind of curious to see what KCP looks like next to John Morant compared to how he looked next to, the Jalen Suggs and Cole Anthony. Cole Anthony is available, but he doesn't really check any of the boxes the Lakers are looking to check. So, yeah, I would trade Maxey and Gabe Vincent for KCP. It's an interesting one. I think Maxey and KCP have to be used to address either like a Wiggins type player or another big to pair with DeAndre Ayton to avoid having to consider the Jackson Hayes thing. But now, as I said a second ago, Horford, I would love to be wrong here because he would be fantastic as a backup. But I just don't see a path for the Lakers unless the Warriors bungle this situation and maybe waiting for Kuminga, Horford gets sick of waiting for Kuminga and he just makes his decision to go to a different team. That's possible. But yeah, I just don't really see why Horford would sign with the Lakers when he could get more money from, and again, a somewhat larger role from Golden State. Now, if he just wants to win a championship, taking a little bit less to play with Luka and LeBron probably makes a little bit more sense. So that's worth, I guess, considering. Melton, I would keep him pinned up top on the list. I think the fit is there. There's been a lot of noise there. I would just kind of keep an eye on that situation. John Howe writes, can we get DeAnthony Melton? What do you think? As I just said a second ago, they definitely can. I'm not going to go so far as to say they will, but I definitely think the Lakers are one. Like, here's something that if it was to get aggregated, I totally understand it. I am framing it in the way that it should be framed. I think the Lakers should be considered one of the favorites for DeAnthony Melton. Not the favorite, maybe, because it's a little early and this time of year, too much stuff. I'm also kind of snake bit from the Brook Lopez situation, so I'm a little gun shy, but they are definitely one of the favorites for DeAnthony Melton. They like him a lot. Ryan Lucas writes, what about Rashawn Holmes as a backup? Is his price low? Is he even available? I think he's on Washington. He might just get bought out, honestly. Oh, that's the wrong one. Fanspo. I'm pretty sure. I'm just doing this live. Great entertainment here for those of you watching. By the way, those of you watching, thank you for doing so. Please hit that like and subscribe button. All right. Rashawn Holmes. Yeah, he's on an expiring. I think there's a decent chance he gets bought out. And if he's your backup behind Ayton and another backup, I would for example, I would much rather, like, if the Lakers can get somehow Landale and Holmes, and Landale also interesting. He was waived ahead of his July 7th guarantee date, which means he's going to be looking to be like to make up for the money that he isn't going to make this year from Houston. So Landale might cost the biannual or something close to it. Might be slightly more than the minimum. But Holmes, if he is bought out, you would be able to probably get him for the minimum. So yeah, Holmes, I've always liked Rashawn Holmes' game. He just has found himself in some tough situations. The Kings have always sucked. The Wizards are, basketball hell. So I still believe that there's just a little bit left in the tank to be a third string center on a pretty good team. I'd be cool with it. I would like it. Brandon Omeng writes, thoughts on Herb, like him over Wiggs, D-Melt for the biannual. Well, look, I do like Herb Jones more than Andrew Wiggins. That is true. As far as like cost and realistic, like the reality of the situation is, it's hard for me to believe that they would trade a wing of that caliber while they're still trying to be good. Remember, they just traded away their draft pick for next season. They're still interested in being good. So if you get Herb Jones, you're going to be sending out win now pieces, and I don't think the Lakers have enough to get Herb without giving up Austin. Which, if you think you should give up Austin for Herb Jones, okay, maybe. I don't know. I probably wouldn't. Tim Jenkins Guitar writes, Wiggins is the last piece. Rui and Dalton do it. Yeah, I don't think the Lakers have a problem with it being Rui and Dalton. The problem that they have with it, based on what I've heard, is the first rounder. That is a no-fly zone. Like, that's not going to happen. So until Miami kind of changes their stance on that part of the conversation, I don't think Wiggins is going to happen. But I think it could be done or it should be able to be done for Rui, Dalton, and Gabe. Especially if the Lakers get Melton, I would do that. Brandon Omeng writes, if the Dubs give Kuminga the full MLE, would Al choose them over us for the biannual? Not sure how I feel about Richards. Wasn't very good in Phoenix with the Suns. The Phoenix situation, man, that was such a tire fire that I kind of, you guys have, those of you who have listened to me for a long time know how much I care about context and overall situation. And that's why I really believe in Ayton, because he is coming from two shitty situations. This Phoenix situation last year, right, where it was like, Devin, can you try playing point? Bradley, can you try playing point? Bradley, can you come off of the bench? No. Okay, guess you're not coming off of the bench. You had Budenholzer, kind of fighting with, not fighting, but like having kind of terse back and forth all year with reporters there. That was such a mess that I don't know that you could expect all that much from a Nick Richards who's only making $5 million a year. So I would buy low on Richards. I would see what you could maybe get for, or what it would take to get him. I know that Phoenix is trying to cut costs. So if you can get Richards for basically just financial flexibility, it's like one thing that I've been kind of thinking about is, well, it's kind of tough because the Lakers don't have enough smaller contracts to do this with, but like the Shake, essentially, if you send over Shake Milton's contract, I asked Eric Pincus about this last night / this morning, and if you send over Shake Milton's contract uh, for Nick Richards, you would just have to guarantee it to the extent that it, fulfills the need of the trade. And that would give them some financial flexibility. Seeing as the Lakers don't have very much in terms of other assets to work with, giving Phoenix the financial flexibility that they're looking for, and given how many centers that they employ, I think there's a fit there. That's not sourced. That's just me kind of reading tea leaves and connecting dots. But that feels like something that the Lakers should be able to work with there. And what I will say is I do know that they've called about Richards. I just don't know the specifics of that conversation. Let's see. Tim Jenkins guitar. The supposed asking price for Wiggins is Rui, Dalton, and the pick. That's too much. Maybe Maxey, Dalton, the pick, or Rui, or Rui and Dalton with no picks. Yep, I would agree with that, Mr. Guitar. I would give up Rui. I would give up Dalton, but I would not give up any picks. Even pick swaps, I wouldn't do it. And if Miami says that they aren't interested, then that's too bad, I guess. But yeah, the problem is you're negotiating with an organization that doesn't have its shit together right now, given the stuff that we have talked about before. So that it's kind of like trying to have a conversation with an illogical person. Like, it's just not possible. And right now, I just don't know that it's possible to make a trade with the Miami Heat while this Pat Riley and ownership son situation remains the way that it is. Appetizers and sushi, you always make me hungry. It's part of it's because of the time that I normally record, and part of it is because of your name. But appetizers and sushi sounds so good, always. All right. Do you think Holiday will be waived? If so, Lakers, Drew Holiday? Is that who you're saying? I do not think that Holiday is going to be waived because he has like 2 more years left on his contract, maybe 3. And like, even if they waived and stretched him, that waived and stretched contract would run until the cows come home. So I don't think they're going to waive Drew Holiday. Sean actually, had a good explanation about Holiday yesterday, about that situation with Holiday yesterday, where he said that he's the kind of guy that you acquire if you're trying to get better. And I think they realized last year they are too talented. So now they're in that kind of tweener spot to try to get better from where they were last year in a really tough conference, albeit. But I think at least at the beginning of the year, they're going to give it a go and see how good they are. And then midway through the season, depending on how that goes, I don't think Drew Holiday will probably always be available because his contract is so tough. I don't think he'll ever be bought out until a couple of years from now. But Robert Williams, Matisse Thybulle, that kind of player, Jeremy Grant, like Sean said, is already available. But those kinds of expiring, useful role players, if Portland starts to kind of get detached from the rest of the bulk of the Western Conference, that's when those types of players maybe become more available. We have, let's see, let's run with Jason Kelly. Where do you rank our roster in the West right now? So Jovan and I did this. Jovan was up against his heart out, so I didn't go into too much detail there, but I'll just say it again. I have, in terms of the tiers of the conference, right? I would say Thunder, Denver, Houston are tier 1 in the conference. That might be like Thunder fans probably aren't going to like that I say that. I don't like you guys anyway. So Thunder, Rockets, Denver, I would have all grouped at the top of the conference. I think Thunder, the OKC is probably going to have a better regular season maybe than some of those teams. They ran away with the conference last year, and they'll probably be better next year. With Shea maybe improving a little bit. Chet is definitely going to improve next year. Maybe Jalen Williams gets a little bit better. So, like in terms of internal growth, I think they'll be better next year. But I don't think they will take as the necessary step just in terms of organic growth to be in their own tier aside from Denver, who I think I think we're in for like a insane Jokic season. We just had one, but I think Jokic is going to have, kind of remind everybody, oh yeah, that's right. He's the best player in the world. I think you might have that kind of a season. We'll see how everything kind of meshes in Houston. It's always really kind of interesting when a team tries to take that step from, oh, hey, look at that, that's a good season, to title contender. That's the hardest step in like the transitions that you can take in the NBA. And I think OKC is also going to get Topic back, which is he was a lottery pick last year. So there's a good chance that they'll be better. But like we saw Denver push them, we saw Indiana push them. I don't know. I don't think maybe they'll have to actually be a dynasty for me to consider them a dynasty. But we'll kind of see. But as far as Houston goes, though, I'm really fascinated by how they handle the expectations of, yeah, we exceeded those expectations last year. This year we have to be good. That's going to be something to watch. I would put the Lakers in either a tier of their own or I thought I heard my son crying. Either in a tier of their own where they are between that first grouping and Minnesota, the Clippers, and Golden State. Or like I think Jokic, or not Jokic, I think Jovan kind of talked me into the Lakers being grouped with Minnesota. Yeah, I would probably say that they are in tier 2 there. So I would say they're like a 4th or a 5th best roster right now in the conference. Now, again, that's assuming LeBron is on the roster going into the season, and that's assuming that this is the roster. I think it can still get better. I think it needs to get better. And if it does, I don't know that there's anything that the Lakers could do that would realistically put them in the group at the top of the conference. But so much of these playoffs are about matchups that I think the Lakers can give themselves a real shot against that tier of team in the playoffs if they meet the right ones. So, yeah, that'll be kind of the goal here, is to put yourself in a situation here where, okay, I could kind of see how they would push that team or beat that team in a series, and only have to look at a series that way once, maybe twice. The problem with the way that their rosters were built before was they had to do that 4 times. Like every series that they were getting ready to play, and you're like, I could kind of see how they could win this one. And you could win the first round that way. You might be able to win the second round that way. But when you get into the conference finals, let alone the finals, you're going up against the absolute best teams in the league. And it's hard to, after looking at a first or a second round opponent the way that the Lakers had to, you get eventually to the conference finals and you're like, yeah, I don't see it against this team. And if the Lakers are able to basically, go into a series in the first round as, yeah, we should beat these guys quickly. Second round might be a little tougher, but this should be another, uh, predictable win. You get to the conference finals and you're like, okay, this is going to be tough. Margin for error here is really, really finite. So let's see how this goes. I would say that's a playoff path that the Lakers should be able to arrive at with a couple more moves, either this summer or over the course of the season. I think they're close enough to that. All right. That is going to do it. I keep on saying I don't like these ones to go too long because of the time of year that it is. Plan, as always, take this, grab this audio, chop it up, put it on the feed, and let you guys enjoy it. And then probably a little bit later tonight, maybe record a lowdown to kind of sum up the stuff that did or didn't happen today over the course of the day. And then, yeah, that takes us into the weekend. As you guys know, to those of you who listen to the LFR pod, Pete's voice is really going through it right now. So I'm going to go ahead and give him tomorrow off and let him recover, and then he'll be back next week, hopefully. And but I do still want to record something tomorrow, so I'll either do something solo or I will do something. I'll find a guest for tomorrow's show, depending on if the Lakers make a trade or if it's rumored that they're going to make a trade or something like that. Maybe I'll try to bring somebody on to have a nice conversation with. So that's the plan for tomorrow. It is the 4th of July tomorrow, so it's going to be kind of difficult to do that. It's on a Friday. As you guys know, every time we go into these big holiday weekends, I always ask that y'all remain safe. If you guys are going to do any drinking, please just hop in an Uber. If you guys are going to, be out late, even being tired is often just as bad, if not worse, than being drunk. So hop in an Uber or just stay the night there. But please be safe. Those of you who live in states that allow fireworks, again, be safe. We've seen some pretty bad accidents with those things as well. And I'm going to enjoy it. I look forward to the 4th of July every year. I do a whole bunch of barbecuing. We live on a street where we, we'll pop some poppers and stuff like that. Kids love that. So I'm going to enjoy it. And normally there are some actual NBA fireworks to talk about too. And if there are, I'll be right here. So hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Please be safe. And I will talk to you when I talk to you. Thanks again to Jovan.
Bye, everyone.